I wanted to get to this story. There was a really good article at the Daily Beast by Mark Hertsgaard about BP, the 2010 Gulf oil spill, and the chemical dispersants BP was using at the time to quote-unquote clean up the oil. Now, I'm very interested in this story because I've been following it since 2010. At the time of the oil spill, I wrote about chemical dispersants and how they had been banned in certain countries because they are highly, highly toxic. And they don't really clean up the oil. They just coagulate it and sink it.
It's like poisonous duct tape.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I got into a really bizarre email exchange with a PR person from BP where they lost their shit on me and said to me, and I quote, "What do you want from us?"
It was after they would like give you like a bullshit answer and you would press them. Bullshit answer, you'd press them. Bullshit answer, they'd press them. And I imagine the tone like, what do you want from me? What can I do to make you stop emailing me?
Yeah, essentially, like, I just want you to go away. And I just kept asking about, you know, BP's cleanup efforts and stuff like that. But anyway, that's the reason that I have really wanted to cover the story a lot on Citizen Radio. But Mark Hertsgaard for the Daily Beast wrote a phenomenal piece on the aftermath of the Gulf oil spill and the chemical dispersant
and
situation.
It's worse than you think.
It's absolutely horrific. And I'm going to link to it in the episode recap. I really recommend everybody read it in full, but here's the gist of it. There's one woman that is profiled in the article. Her name's Jamie Griffin.
Yeah.
And she was feeding hundreds of cleanup workers during the BP oil disaster. And the workers, when they were showing up to be fed, were tracking the gunk inside on their boots. And Griffin, as chief cook and maid, was trying to clean it up. So she contacted BP, you know, because she was wondering if this stuff was safe. And they said, quote, "It's as safe as Dawn dishwashing liquid." But now what has happened to this woman is
someone shut down the Dawn factory because that shit is poison.
Yeah, it's absolutely horrific. So Mark writes, by July, unstoppable muscle spasms were twisting her hands into immovable claws. In August, she began losing her short-term memory. After cooking professionally for 10 years, she couldn't remember the recipe for vegetable soup. One morning, she got in the car to go to work, only to discover she hadn't put on pants. The right side, but only the right side, of her body started acting crazy. It felt like the nerves were coming out of my skin. It was so painful. My right leg swelled. My ankle would get as wide as my calf, and my skin got incredibly itchy. And so he talks with this doctor who says these are the same symptoms experienced by soldiers who return from the Persian Gulf War with Gulf War syndrome. Oof. So it's worse than we thought. There's another article that I'm going to link to at takepart.com where scientists have discovered the chemical agents used in the Gulf spill cleanup are destroying marine life.
Jesus.
So not only are they destroying the lives of these, you know, the workers who cleaned up the oil spill, but also some of their livelihoods. These fishermen, you know, and fish, you know, people who fish for a living are going to go back to work, and they have already found this, that there's a lot of dead fish, a lot of dead crabs.
Yeah, and, you know, just to kind of recap, going back to the dispersant, BP comes in, and they have a massive spill, destroying wildlife, land, food supplies, et cetera, right? Then they use a toxic chemical, which has now made a ton of people very ill. Children, I mean, if you just walked in it, if you breathed in the fumes, you know, we're seeing the effects. And why? Well, the dispersant doesn't even fix the problem. All it does, BP essentially, and this company, all it does is they are poisoning people so that they could give the illusion that the oil was gone, so that cameras would leave.
Yeah,
that's how little they give a shit about you, and these are the companies that get tax breaks.
Yeah, that's a big part of the chemical dispersant story that I think people thought, it was going to magically evaporate the oil. Yeah, it's exactly what Jamie said. It sunk it. It hit it. And scientists found all kinds of underwater plumes of the oil. Yeah.
Simpsons fish.
So, BP was fined by the government, but then they were able to get that cut by like $3 billion. And I think when people see the huge amount of money BP had to pay the government, they're like, that'll stop them. But when you compare that little fine to how much profit they make on risky, underground drilling, like what happened in the Gulf, it's really not an incentive for them to stop.
No, and
if every once in a while they have to pay, a little bit of, for them, pocket change, they're going to keep doing it.
I mean, they essentially have like a fuck up fund. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
They have money where that's just what they do, and you see that it doesn't scare other companies. I mean, look what Exxon. There was another spill in Arkansas with Exxon. And how did our intrepid media handle it? Well, Exxon said there's a no-fly zone. So, okay. How does Exxon declare that?
Yeah, and I mean, that happened, we see this happen all the time in, as you said, Exxon, but also BP at the time was telling journalists they could go certain places, but not other places. I had journalists friends of mine, go to the Gulf, and they were told by BP they couldn't go to certain areas and watch the cleanup effort. And it's like, I'm sorry, I didn't realize BP and Exxon were the U.S. government.
Right.
But they kind of are. It's like they give massive donations to the government to the point where the government, when a disaster like this happens, largely lets them regulate the cleanup effort.
Well, we saw that with Occupy Wall Street, where, you had Chase and these banks giving the NYPD donations suddenly of like a ton of money. At the same time that the cops were beating the shit out of protesters and evicting them from Zuccotti Park, and it's like, how is this legal?
Right.
Like, I mean, it's under the table bribes, except there's no table. Like, it's not even under the table. It's just fucking blatant.
Over the table bribes.
Hey.